did not surprise me. One thing that astonished me was the downward revision in the budget deficit or government borrowing target. And it's obvious from the statement that was presented that the government is prioritizing fiscal consolidation and debt stabilization. This explains why they have revised downward their borrowing target. The deficit target is their borrowing target. Now, this is understandable. It's welcome also, given our recent history of building up debt to an unsustainable level. It's understandable that they are cautious about their borrowing and their debt accumulation. But you'll find that the revised deficit is going to involve sacrificing some expenditure. And this is principally because the revenues have not flowed into the coffers as they had projected. Now, the cutback to spending presents a threat to economic growth and economic activity unless private sector spending and investment pick up the slack. So one can hope that the gradual stabilization of the macroeconomy and the kicking off of the government's stimulus measures and other real sector interventions will stimulate private sector spending and investment so that can fill the gap which will be left by this spending cutback. That's what one would hope. But otherwise, you find that the priority is to continue with fiscal consolidation so that we can stabilize the debt, the public debt burden at the minimum.
Let me get your thoughts also on this. For a lot of analysts, we're looking forward to a presentation that will consolidate investors' confidence in this economy and government commitment to be fiscally prudent. Have you seen that with what the minister has said with respect to these reviews?
Well, I think, the decision to revise downward the deficit and to indicate strongly a commitment to improved fiscal management will provide some positive assurance to investors. You would know that in recent years, the major concern about the Ghanaian economy has been the trajectory of public borrowing and debt accumulation. So this should provide some assurance to investors. However, I think we clearly have a revenue challenge, which also will concern some investors, and analysts. We clearly have a revenue challenge, and it seems to reflect a trend in recent years. And it's important that we take serious measures to improve the revenue mobilization effort. I had hoped that the responses within Parliament to the presentation would have highlighted the revenue challenge of the state, and that the conversation would have shifted towards a bipartisan consensus on how to improve domestic revenue mobilization in Ghana. Because domestic revenue mobilization ultimately is what will relieve us of this intolerable debt burden.
Finally, on the IMF program, it looks like it's clear they are ending in April 2018. For you, worried we are not going to extend the program?
Well, I cannot say now, what is the direction with the program. There's been confusion over whether it's going to end in April 2018 or December 2018. But what I can say is this. To complete the program, in particular, the structural reforms underpinning the fiscal measures we have been taking, we certainly would need more time. We have so far received only half of the program's financing. And so it's sensible to expect that we would allow more time to receive the remaining financing and to complete the remaining measures. That's my view on that.
So that was Leslie Mensah. He is with the Institute of Fiscal Studies with respect to giving us his purview or views on this particular presentation by the finance minister. And it looks like he has some concerns, even though he believes that, yes, they have made some progress. There's still some areas that is a little bit challenging, and they need to actually work on that one. So let me still bring in some reactions from members of parliament here on this whole presentation by the Finance Minister. Honorable, welcome to our coverage of the mid-year review by the Finance Minister. For you, as a Member of Parliament representing your constituency as well, are you worried about these cuts and how that would impact on whatever program the government wants to take or not?
Yeah, thank you very much. First and foremost, let me put this on record. I'm disappointed but not surprised that this is how they chose to go. I mean, this was a government that even within 100 days was touting 103 achievements. I think you can recall that. And when it came to the crunch for the House to debate the issue of what the finance minister had presented, they were running to hide under the facade of a statement. So it can tell, it's right from the onset. You can see that the government was very uncomfortable with opening up the issue for debate. Because, like we said, it's hollow. They only painted window dressing to hide the inability to perform within the last 6 months. And that is abundantly very clear. And so that is what we want to place on record. Now, we are talking about a government that says that external debt is not growing. In the finance minister's own statement, he presented a figure of $138.9 billion. I'm sure it's on the record. And also alluded to the fact that when they were taking over power in January 7th, 2017, it was $122 billion. So just do your common mathematics. That we didn't expect, and this was as at the end of May. We didn't expect of 4 months.
How do you respond to the argument that all these borrowings are geared towards managing our debt position? You need to borrow cheaper funds to actually bring down the whole overall debt.
In fact, I can say that if it's not for the voodoo economics that we are being subjected to by the finance minister and Dr. Bawumia, it's incredible. How can you go and borrow long-term securities like the 2.25 billion that we went to borrow at 19.75%? For short-term,
you think that is not cheap compared to the previous bond that was
the short-term securities, the 5-year bonds attract 16.34%. Do the difference. 16.35% and then 19.75%. Look at the difference. Almost 3.4% difference. And then you go there. So how can you borrow at 19.75% to go and retire at 16.4% debt? Does it make sense? Just look at the economy. That's what I'm saying, that unless the MPP people think that we have sand in our heads. Otherwise, how can you go and borrow at 19.75% to retire at 16.34% debt? It doesn't make sense. You should rather be borrowing cheaper to retire more expensive.
And you think that is not happening?
It doesn't make sense.
You think that is not happening?
I'm just pointing out, how do you borrow at 19.75% to retire 16.5%? It doesn't make sense.
Thank you so much, Honorable. And this is still our coverage of the media.
And I'm saying that they should be candid with the good people of this country. Because I can tell you that, like some of the farcical claims they were making, they are borrowing so much, but it will not reflect in the level of debt.
Thank you so much, Honorable. And this is our coverage of the mid-year review by the Finance Minister. And I have with me here Honorable Okujato. He's a Member of Parliament as well and a former Deputy Minister of Education. You've been there before these presentations and all those things. For you, looking at what the Minister has done, are you worried about any implications on your constituency as well in terms of capital expenditure? It has been cut.
Yes, certainly I'm worried, like most Ghanaians, especially as the Finance Minister stated today that they are hoping to clear arrears by 2019. During the campaign, they promised Ghanaian contractors that when they come into power, within the first 100 days of assuming the realms, the governance of our country, they will pay all contractors. Now you are telling us that in 2 years' time, by 2019, you have a situation where in this budget, the minister has not been able to give us confidence about new ideas, creative ways of generating revenue. There is a major revenue shortfall of over 2 billion cedis. And there is no indication even in this review that you are going to come up with creative ways. The only thing he says is that they are hoping to fight corruption at the ports. We need a revenue. And so if you have all of these promises, you promise that you will start the one district, one factory by June this year. You haven't achieved that. You promise that you are going to start paying the nursing and teacher trainees the allowances by first 3 months of this year. You haven't started that. And all we are hearing are revenue shortfalls and the fact that you are downsizing on a daily basis. No hope, no bold program that will create jobs for our people and will ensure that our contractors who are owed, companies will thrive. You have a situation where you are saying you pay companies, you clear these arrears by 2019. What it means is that you are going to compound the unemployment situation where companies will have to shut down, they will have to lay off workers by 2019.
But what would you tell those who might also argue that faced with a challenge in revenue because you spend what you have, if revenue is not doing well because of a seasonality effect, which we've seen over the years, how do you manage that situation? Do you spend what you don't have so that you balloon your deficit, or you stagger this expenditure?
What you do is raise the revenue. You have to raise the revenue.
From where we've seen Q1, and this is not just with this government, and we've seen in other previous governments as well, where revenue numbers are not good, especially in Q1. Q2, there's been a marginal improvement, but it could have been better. So where do you spend?
You are right that the inability to raise revenue as a country has been a perennial challenge. But that is why you have a new team in place that during the campaign, you recall, promised that they had a magic wand. That first of all, they said that if we fought corruption, the money is here in Ghana. They said that if we were able to implement creative strategies, we will be able to raise the revenue here, and that Ghana is rich. The candidate said it many times, that Ghana is not poor. The money is in Ghana. So where has the money gone to? So we can't buy that excuse that we couldn't raise revenue. Revenue generation is a functionality of the executive. They must come up with creative ways to do it. And you cannot continue with this situation where virtually every promise you made is not seeing the light of day. Free SHS is not covering the three-year batches. Only first years are going to benefit. Even the allocation of 400 million cedis is woefully inadequate. You promised that you start factories by June this year to create jobs for our youth. It hasn't happened. There is no indication when the first factory in a district will start.
Honorable, some will say that steps are supposed to be taken. Really, they are taking proposals, they are receiving applications. At least there are certain things on the drawing board for you to say that we've seen certain things being taken, rather than it not being implemented at all.
You see, nobody asked them to give us a target. You gave us a target that by June this year, the factories will come alive. You gave us that target. So we are only, as a responsible minority, holding you accountable. That where are the factories that you said? You promised that you pay contractors within the first 100 days of assuming power. That is what you told road contractors when you met them during the campaign. Then now we are hearing that by 2019 is when you hope to clear arrears. I mean, that is not acceptable. You see, we shouldn't have a situation where during campaigns, all kinds of promises are made. We do not properly analyze. All kinds of promises are made, lectures are delivered, the people are carried along, they want to give you, try you and see, and then you get the power, and then you are making excuses. We cannot continue that way.
Do you think that what they have done, they will not end the year on a good note in terms of being realistic with the numbers and moderating their projections?
Clearly, the signs are worrying. Let me state that as a minority, we still contend that the approach they use, coming by a statement and not a motion, we contend that it is wrong. When you are revising targets, this is a house of records. What we have approved in March this year is what stands. You have come to give us information. We should be able to amend the old information with the new information that you have brought. Saying that
George Rafe with a member of parliament there, Okujetua Blackwa there, speaking about his concerns on this statement that was placed on the floor of parliament. Well, one of the major things that the government, of course, promised to do was to remove what they called the nuisance taxes. Well, we'll be going to Abossey Okai, one of the groups that Abossey Okai has, one of the groups, of course, that were very excited about that particular policy initiative. And so we'll be going there shortly to find out what they make of this mid-year budget review, whether or not it is reflecting the removal of those nuisance taxes, is reflecting in their business. But before we do that, here is the Minister of Finance on whether or not those initiatives actually worked.
Review of import duty and tax exemptions. Mr. Speaker, while government's focus is on reducing taxes to enhance production, we are also determined to tackle the systemic abuse in the exemptions regime. There shall be a comprehensive review of the regime on import duty exemptions and tax reliefs with a view to eliminating abuses and improving efficiency in the application of these incentives. To this end, the review will cover, among others, the following exemptions and tax reliefs as a matter of urgency: import duties, taxes and levies payable by MDAs and other government departments, import duties on all forms of taxes and levies payable by both domestic and foreign companies, suppliers and contractors executing projects and contracts in the country, import duty on all forms of taxes and levies payable by employees, directors and senior officials of both domestic and foreign companies, suppliers and contractors executing projects in the country, import duties and all forms of taxes and levies payable by both domestic and foreign companies and investors doing business in the country, and import duties on all forms of taxes and levies payable by non-governmental and charity organizations. Mr. Speaker, as a transition arrangement henceforth, applications for these import duties.
So that was Minister of Finance Ken Ofori-Atta in the budget presentation itself, actually announcing those taxes will be cut. Let's go over to Abossey Okai. Like I said, it's a vehicle spare parts hub, and they were one of the groups that were most excited about that announcement. Daniel Dazi is standing by there. Let's find out whether indeed it is reflected on the ground.
He and most of government is satisfied with the performance of this government in the past 6 months. But for people here in Abossey Okai, one major promise from the main budget statement that was read earlier in the year rings in their minds. That budget saw the abolition of the 1% import duties on spare parts for vehicles. And we want to know if after the effecting of that particular tax review, there are felt the effect here on the market. I have with me some spare parts dealers here. Let's find out from them what they think. Opening Anape area Mitchell. Pocho, what ton Jewa?
I'm a mechanical.
In the beginning of the year, yet say ya titi a tobi a war spare parts a ye cry if you're manone edeba Ganano. What were your mechanic? So, who toss spare parts now? Who say inside be a bab? Nimbonuana.
Society, dear, in your falcon. Go over cover be no for the cover be no so. Tis Sandy in your falcon. It drew by via which who say, Okona Cotadi no, Obecona. Shots, we shots now, but Obeko be a binyan by 3,000. Obeko got to say 5,000. Tia born a dear. A breezy, a coffin to Sana.
Now, or tete or modianestono, almost a dentina, a bona buffer.
See, do a muko you money manoa. Ya yi tasi be the fees in Tina Mom's or Mato money man's headache about form.
Now, or modiano, a was no so dear no mocha.
Omedia stayed almost no moon he. Omdomzo moon he intino. Omania Manson on beton aboard in San on bed on beton.
And see, we'll compare because me sure say baby any bonny war form than normally will better. And see, we'll compare generally wage my way no the cost now for one.
Oh, the cost in there. You know who be a honey man here from there. You to me say me there a mammy. The kota minyaka kre free. Tim de mu say a mammy come.
And for how long now we who say in society or a born man our business are we in?
Oh, I fear is seen from 23 March never yan who say difference can cry a day about and Yamato.
So for this particular trader, his observation is that the prices have come down for spare parts in some of the shops, but for some of the shops, the prices are still high. When I asked him the reasons that the vendors have been given for reducing their prices, what he said is that they've told him some taxes have been removed at the port. However, there are some who are saying they are not seeing any such tax reductions, and so they are unable to reduce the prices for him. He says generally for March till now, it looks like his cost of doing business has gone down because of these changes he has seen in some of the spare parts. Let me ask.
More of that in our subsequent bulletins, of course. Look out for that in Joy News Prime. Right now, though, we'll have to take a very quick break for sports on the pulse.